Welcome back. Today I'm sharing how to make this adorable mini vanilla cake. It's based on my go-to vanilla layer cake recipe, but there are a few modifications. We start by adding 1 cup of all-purpose flour, 1 cup of granulated sugar, 1 teaspoon of baking powder, and a 1/4 teaspoon or just a pinch of salt into a bowl. We're going to whisk those together until they're well incorporated, and now it's time to start incorporating our wet ingredients. We're adding 1/4 cup of vegetable oil and 1/4 cup of melted butter that's slightly cooled. We're also adding in 1 egg, and we're going to whisk these together first by focusing on those wet ingredients and then mixing them around to incorporate the dry ingredients into it. So the mixture should be very thick and almost a little bit chunky, as you can see here, but don't worry, we're going to add in a bit more liquid to thin out the batter. We're adding in 1/2 cup of buttermilk, you can also use whole milk, along with 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. We're going to slowly whisk this together until the batter is smooth, and we're taking care not to overmix our batter here. We're stirring just until our batter comes together, and then we're pouring this into 3 prepared pans that are 4 inches across. So I like to add parchment rounds to the bottom of my pans and spray with nonstick spray to make sure that my cakes easily release once they're baked, but you can also use 1 batch of batter to make 2 6-inch cake layers. While those bake in a preheated 350-degree oven for 30 to 32 minutes, we're going to work on our frosting. So we don't need a lot of frosting here, so we're only using 3/4 cup of unsalted butter, and then to that we're adding 1/4 teaspoon of salt and 2 teaspoons of vanilla. Once that's mixed together, we're slowly incorporating 3 cups of powdered sugar into the mixture, and at first it should look a little bit crumbly like this, and at this point I like to scrape down the sides of the bowl just to make sure all the powdered sugar really is getting incorporated and it's not getting caked onto your bowl. I then add my remaining powdered sugar along with a bit of heavy cream to help thin out the mixture. For me, the perfect amount was 1 tablespoon plus 1 teaspoon of heavy cream. The amount of cream you need to use can vary based on the temperature of your butter, the temperature of your kitchen, and a lot of other factors, so just keep adding heavy cream or additional powdered sugar until you feel like the consistency is right. Once my cake layers were baked and cooled, I trimmed some of the caramelization off the sides just to make them easier to frost, and I also trimmed off the tops. This just makes it easier to stack, otherwise our little cake would be quite tall. Now I know not everybody has a spinning cake stand, so I wanted to challenge myself with this cake and see if I could decorate it without one. So as you can see, I'm using the stationary cake stand here, and I'm building my cake on a tiny little grease-proof cake board. You could also build it on a plate though, whatever you have on hand. So I'm carefully spreading an even layer of buttercream onto my cake layers and then working the frosting around the side to create my crumb coat. I found that using this up and down motion along the sides of the cake actually was the easiest way to get the frosting onto the cake. I then used my bench scraper to smooth out my crumb coat and then removed the extra frosting from the top using a small offset spatula. Once my crumb coat was nice and smooth, I chilled my cake in the freezer for about 10 minutes. You also could chill it in the fridge for about 30 minutes or until the frosting is firm to the touch. I then repeated my earlier steps to add my second layer of frosting and took my time smoothing it out. Getting frosting smooth on a cake is already challenging on its own, and it's much more difficult without a spinning cake stand and on this small of a cake. So this took me quite a few minutes, and once I was finally happy with how smooth the frosting was, I put my extra frosting into a piping bag fit with a Wilton 1M frosting tip or an open star tip, and then I piped some tiny little swirls around the top of the cake. This cake definitely needed a pop of color, so I decided to add some small non-pearl sprinkles around the top. I figured they're mini sprinkles, which are perfect for our mini cake. I also added some sprinkles around the base, and then I added these obscenely tall candles to the top of the cake. So number one, these are pretty fun candles. They have kind of a glittery base to them, which is awesome, but they're also the only candles I had on hand, and I made these during quarantine, so they had to do the job. This cake really is perfect for any small get-togethers or celebrations or birthdays during quarantine. It feeds about 4 to 8 people depending on how big you consider a slice. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you want to make this mini vanilla cake, the recipe is up on Chelsweets.com.